What if unity wasn't just a buzzword, but something we could actually live out in our communities? If you've been listening for a while, you know that I spend a lot of my time working with braver angels to bridge divides and renew trust in our communities. My guest this week, Adam Mizel, is walking a very similar path. As co-founder and CEO of Us United, Adam's on a nationwide journey, sitting down with sheriffs and community members, breaking through the noise of labels and politics, and proving that unity is built through respect and real conversation. Our work runs on parallel tracks with the same destination, a more connected and hopeful America.
We started to do events with Chris and with other sheriffs and built relationships. And I started to see here's a network of people who are elected. Yes, they are in law enforcement, but because they're elected, they spend so much time building bridges and bringing their communities together because they report to the people. They don't report to a mayor or city council or governor. They report to the people. And it took me a little while. Sometimes I'm not the smartest stack in the bunch, but I was like, we kept doing more, and I'm like, this is an interesting group. And so after last year, we did the 12 sheriffs all on our holiday spectacular in December for the 5th time. And so we should do more. And that led to this idea of the Sheriff Unity Network. And it's spread like wildfire. I mean, the sheriffs love it as we go around talking to people. And we've hit into a vein that I think is really powerful.
Stick around, friends. It's another DTH episode you won't want to miss. Roll that intro. Welcome back, my friends, to the Derate The Hate podcast. I'm your host, Wilk Wilkinson, your blue-collar sage, calming outrage and helping to navigate a world divided by fog and those who would spread that fear, outrage, and grievance. The Derate The Hate podcast is proudly produced in collaboration with Braver Angels, America's largest grassroots, cross-partisan organization working towards civic renewal. This podcast amplifies the mission that we share to foster a more respectful and united America where civic friendship thrives even when we disagree. Each week, through the power of story, conversation, and connection with incredible guests, we work to build bridges instead of barriers. Not to change minds on the issues, but to change how we see one another when we differ. Because, friends, it really is about bettering the world one attitude at a time. We did not create the hate, but together we can derate the hate. So be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, share it with a friend, and visit braverangels.org to learn how you can get involved in the movement to bridge the partisan divide. Friends, I am so incredibly grateful that you have joined me for another powerful Derate the Hate episode. So let's get to it. One of the many things that I've learned through my work with Braver Angels is that unity does not happen in theory or by accident. It happens when people step out, engage across differences, and build trust in their communities. My guest today, Adam Mizel, is doing just that. Adam's crisscrossing the country, engaging with sheriffs, local leaders, and everyday Americans to foster understanding and collaboration. Demonstrating that the antidote to toxic polarization is not found in labels, identity politics, or waiting for someone in Washington. It's found in the personal connections that we create face to face. In our conversation, Adam and I dive into the shared vision between Us United and Braver Angels, building bridges through dialogue, shifting culture from division to respect, and creating opportunity where sports, community events, and personal experiences spark empathy and real connection. Adam brings both the perspective of a seasoned leader and the heart of someone deeply committed to America's civic renewal. So if you believe like I do that this cultural shift starts with us, neighbors, friends, and fellow citizens willing to show up and listen, you won't want to miss this conversation. Let's get into it with my friend Adam Mizel. Here we go. Adam Mizel, welcome to the Derate The Hate podcast, man. Good to see you today.
Good to see you. I apologize. I'm in public in a corner in front of one of the oldest taverns in Charlestown, Massachusetts, and Boston on a road trip. So I apologize for a little bit of background noise, but we're getting some local color.
Hey, that's all right. That's all right. Road trips are fun. I mean, one of my favorite things to do, Adam, is road trips. And I haven't been to Boston in a very long time, so at least now I get to experience that a little bit.
You got it.
All right. So speaking of this road trip, you were introduced to me, Adam, by a common friend of ours, Neil Ghosh, and he told me about you doing this road trip and going around, and your organization, Us United, is doing a lot of different things and a lot of really cool things in the bridge building space and the unity kind of space. So let's start first of all by telling the DTH listeners what is Us United and how did you find yourself getting into this bridge building and unity space?
Sure. So Us United is a movement for unity that gives Americans the tools and resources they need to reunite the country. It's short and sweet. Simply, it's not coming from politicians, clearly not from media right now. It's up to us, the everyday Americans at a grassroots level, to take the steps, make the changes that are going to reunite the country. And what that means to us is that I think we define a chunk of the problem is so many people live and work in social media in ever shrinking bubbles. And outside of those bubbles, process the world and categorize the world with labels. Again, none of that is bad. But the result of it is, I don't know very many people who will sympathize or compromise with a label. You do that with another person. And we've lost the ability to really interact with people with different experiences and backgrounds than our own. And if you don't do that, you don't see the gray, you don't see different ideas. And it's hard to find common ground because the way you and I are going to understand anything and maybe modify our view is because we hear about someone's personal experience. We see through their eyes. We understand what they're seeing and say, hey, I never thought of that. Because we all are going to think through our own lenses and we need other lenses. And so at the core, Us United is trying to do that. We do a lot with digital connectivity. We do it online. We do it in person with real experiences and events. And one of the things we've created is something called the Sheriff's Unity Network. We've been working with sheriffs along the way. There's 3,086 of them in this country, almost all of them elected. And they're a backbone of a network to build unity. And so we decided to get on a road trip and go across the country and visit a sheriff or two in every state just about in America and hear what they have to say, understand the work they're doing, and go with them into their communities and talk to everyday Americans. And we've talked to hundreds of people over the last month. Been, I think, 22 states so far, so we're not yet halfway through our trip. Living, learning, and finding out what Americans think and believe and what they're doing to build unity.
Awesome. So, Adam, let's get into that a little bit because how did you decide that sheriffs were going to be a kind of a bridging pin in taking Us United and getting into different communities and things like that? I know it's wonderful because sheriffs are elected, but how did that? I guess where did that idea kind of manifest from, or what was the genesis of that?
Well, I believe everything happens for a reason along the way. And one of my co-founders and now really close friends, a gentleman named Sheriff Chris Swanson in Genesee County, Michigan, which is where Flint is. And I met him early in the journey that eventually led to Us United. We hit it off along with our third co-founder and started doing all kinds of things. And through that, I mean, honestly, I didn't know what a sheriff was and what the difference between a sheriff and a police officer was 4.5 years ago. And I think that's true of most Americans today. And that's not a criticism nor a bad thing, but we started to do events with Chris and with other sheriffs and built relationships. And I started to see here's a network of people who are elected. Yes, they are in law enforcement, but because they're elected, they spend so much time building bridges and bringing their communities together because they report to the people. They don't report to a mayor or city council or governor. They report to the people. And it took me a little while. Sometimes I'm not the smartest stack in the bunch, but I was like, we kept doing more, and I'm like, this is an interesting group. And so we led me after last year. We did the 12 sheriffs all on our holiday spectacular in December for the 5th time. And so we should do more, and that led to this idea of the Sheriff Unity Network, and it's spread like wildfire. I mean, the sheriffs love it. as we go around talking to people, and we've hit into a vein that I think is really powerful. So that's where the idea came from.
That's fantastic. I mean, one of the great things with sheriffs being an elected position, but it's not a partisan elected position, right? Which is what I really like about this concept, right? I mean, and or it certainly shouldn't be. I mean, I don't think we want to elect the sheriff of our respective counties on whether they're a Democrat or a Republican or an independent. Sheriffs. Now, while I would contend that most politicians should be serving all the people, a sheriff is definitely one of those people that no matter what it is, whatever situation that they are in, the whole equal protection under the law thing has to come into place, and it's not like I'm going to treat you differently because you're a Republican or treat you different because you're a Democrat or whatever. A sheriff, more than anybody, I think, needs to be one of those people that's completely outside of partisan bounds. Hey, I want to go back to something, and then maybe we can talk a little bit about that more again. But I want to go back to something that you had said earlier, Adam, and I want to talk about labels because you had mentioned labels and the idea that people continue to put labels on people. It's something that I've talked about quite a bit on the Derate The Hate podcast, and how, especially when it comes to politics, right? Where people tend to put other people in boxes and then put a label on that box and then put them up on that shelf and until they're needed, and then that's when the pandering begins. And talk to me a little bit about what you've seen in your travels and how ugly that whole concept of labels, or if you want to get into, be it identity politics, which is probably the biggest instigator of labels and things. This is one of the big problems that I see in our country, is that whole labels, boxes, pandering, things like that. And it doesn't really serve anybody well, and it does more to separate us than bring us together. So talk a little bit more dive a little bit deeper into that labels thing.
Well, you're spot on. I mean, as I said before, it's not a bad thing that people label. We have to process an incredibly complicated world. And the bad thing is that we then assume we know everything from those labels. And that's where the key is, having those conversations so that you don't assume you can judge the cliche of judge the book by the cover. And what I can tell you in talking to hundreds of people, like, again, we started in Michigan, went all the way down to Texas, across the Southeast, made it up to Northeast, and in Boston today. Everybody that I've spoken with, almost everybody, understands that. They're like, we don't want to be divided. We don't want to be assuming we know everything. We need common words. We need to communicate more with everybody, even if we think they're different than us. We need to respect people. We need to have those discussions and get beneath, quote, the label. And I've been inspired and surprised and inspired by that. But that's what I've heard. And I've talked to people who, if you looked at them, they'd pick your label on the red or pick your label on the blue. And sometimes I got to help a little bit of hey, those people don't listen. Those people have an opinion. I'm like, well, if you're saying that, you're part of the problem, right?
Right.
And so we talk a lot about that, but I think people want to break through those labels, and they all talk about we need to communicate, and they all complain that technology and social media has exacerbated labels. And so I got a lot of hope that people are actually more aligned on this than you might have thought before I went on this trip.
Yeah. Well, and that's great. I mean, that is so encouraging to hear that, Adam, because one of the things that I always go back to when I think about the labels and the problems that arise because of the labels, I mean, and I'll agree with you in the sense that labels aren't always bad, but it seems like the only time those labels are highlighted is for bad reasons. But the big thing that stands out for me when it comes to labels or identity politics or things like that is the idea that no individual group is a monolith. And far too often when people are using these labels, they're then made to believe, or people are made to believe when speaking about that label, that everybody within there is a monolith when it comes to the way that they're thinking and the way they're doing things. When that happens, and this is where we run into the biggest problems, when that happens, it tends to set people on a course of, well, these people, that label, thinks this way. So since they think this way, I'm not going to have anything to do with them. I'm not going to have anything to do with them. I'm going to stay over here in my silo because this is where I'm comfortable. And I'm going to stay away from those people because they're those people and they all think this way. It's a horrible way to think about it because and this is when we think about siloing and separation and things like that. I mean, I always go back to, and it's one of the best lines that I've ever heard since I started doing this work in the depolarization space was from Monica Guzman when she says, those who are underrepresented in our life will be overrepresented in our minds and in our imaginations. And then I take that one step further in the sense that, okay, if those people in that particular group are people that I'm going to stay away from, now I'm going to continue to make up things in my mind about them, in my mind and in my imagination. And those things are typically not the best things, right? It's not like we're thinking, oh yeah, those people are awesome. They're baking cakes and they're playing on the swing set with their kids and they're doing all that's not the one thing that we're thinking. We're thinking the bad things. And then now all of a sudden, that imagination part that we're using is turning them into a worse person than they actually are. So we're inclined to stay further away from them. The further separated we are, it's this perpetual exponential cycle of ugliness that just continues to get worse, worse, and worse until it finally becomes a situation where we hate them and we're going to deal with that hate through anger and violence. It's a big old mess.
Yes. But I will give you hope to say I don't think that is as prevalent as you fear from all of my travels and conversations. And I think part of why we started Us United was to give people tools and resources to break away from that, because you got to create those opportunities to interact with those labels, right? And so, for instance, we do something every month, first Thursday of the month, we do a big Zoom. We call it 30 for Us. And we say anyone in America can join. We provide a little structure and a topic, but then we put you in a breakout room with 5 random Americans. I don't know who you're talking to either, but I just got you out of your bubble and out of your comfort zone talking to people. And that's a beauty. That's where technology can be terrific, right? Similarly, we do all kinds of events, like from service days to other kinds of events. If you volunteer with someone, you don't ask them whether they voted red or blue. You don't ask them what they think on abortion or guns. You ask them about life and you work together. And then if you get to those conversations, the label's gone, right? So we try to do more and more things like that. We use sports. I mean, I think sports is one of the unifiers, and we can be rivals on the field and rivals cheering, but we can come together off of it and find through our love of whatever that sport is, common ground, then the label disappears. So you got to find those resources and those tools to break the cycle that you just described. And what I'm just hearing for everyone is either we're doing it or we want to do it. Please show us how to do it. And I think that's a big piece of fighting culture and media that has not been telling that story.
That's right.
We and others have to tell those stories. That's why we're on the road. That's why we're posting all this on social media. It's why we're making a movie about it, because you got to show a different narrative, because then people realize they're not alone in this view.
That's right.
Most people agree with them, and then people do a little more and a little more.
No, that's absolutely right. I mean, one of the big things, and you've kind of alluded to it a couple times here, but one of the big things that I've learned doing this work, Adam, and this is to your point, and you've seen several examples of it in your travels, is we are not nearly as divided as those in politics and those in the media would have you believe. When it comes down to Main Street and kitchen table talks and living room conversations, things like this that we are doing, and when we get together in these communities, we're finding, or sometimes it just takes a little nudge. And you talked about the tools and the structure and things like that. One of the big things at Braver Angels that we do is we provide an excellent structure by which people can come together within their communities, and they then find out that all these things that I'm hearing about this particular group is not actually true. The things I'm told I can't possibly be friends with this particular person or this particular group because they think this way. But the reality is when you do bring these people, I love that. I want to hear more about that 30 for Us too, because it just sounds like a fascinating, easy structure. And yeah, that's the problem is again, when we think about, we are not as a people, we are not as a country nearly as divided as the politicians and the media would have you believe, and how important, and that stresses the importance of what we do in this depolarization and bridge building space. But the idea that we must have the right structure and show people that there are tools available to them to actually make this happen, because this is not a problem. Polarization is obviously not a problem that the government's going to fix. I mean, we just know that. It's we the people that are going to make this happen. I love the old phrase. I spent so many years in business, and one of the things that we'd hear quite often is you cannot fix a problem with the same thinking or the same ideas that created it, right? And for people to believe that there's going to be some politician that's going to swoop in and fix this thing, it's just not going to happen. When I think of another fantastic line from a great friend of mine at Braver Angels, John Wood Jr. says, polarization is the one problem that ensures all other problems will not be solved, right? Well, we can't continue to believe that our problems as a people are going to be solved by the government, especially when those who represent us are far too often not the best of us. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, sure. Well, I mean, first of all, I really do think, and this will sound negative for a second, the government is a reflection of where our culture is and who we are as a people at that moment in time. We get the government we deserve and we ask for sure. So we can bash it all we want, but that's true. One. But two, I think part of it is, and this is, I think, the work you're doing and we're trying to do, rough numbers, I said there's about 15% of the people on each side of the broad political divide who are incredibly invested in division. They don't want it to change. Identity, power, emotion, whatever it may be. The vast majority, 65, 70%, don't feel that way, but they're quiet. They're like, I'm disgusted by what I see. Right. I'm going to go back to work. I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to go back to TikTok, whatever. And I'll tune in every 2 or 4 years for an election. And it's only gotten worse because they've become more withdrawn, and it becomes a spiraling cycle of extremism. We have to engage. And look, they don't have to be as engaged as you might be or I might be, but we need people to pay attention and express their views where they want to see more moderation and be enough engaged in the political process as an audience to talk to. Because then different people ultimately may be elected or will get, again, the government that reflects where the people are. So I don't blame the government. They're elected to do something else, and those people are going to use the tools at best to get where they want to be. We have to have our view of what the culture should look like. And so that's a big one for me. I think unity comes well before politics. You can't get to changing anything unless you get the culture to believe that we should approach the questions differently. And one of the things I always say is unity does not mean unanimity. We shouldn't all agree. We're never all going to agree. That's fine. But unity does mean things like respect and communication and civil discourse and patience and just talking. This is unity, right? When we don't agree, it's still unity if we're talking about it. And I think so part of what I spend a lot of energy on is trying to really look at the levers of culture that can change people's focus and opinion on it. And that's where I come back to sports and I come back to music, food, but big things, because we're taking on big media and big politics. And the one person at a time approach is important, but it needs to be matched sort of ground game, air game. We've got to really drive things through in culture. And then we have a lot of ideas of ways to do that we want to roll out, especially leveraging sports and music, right? Because those are things that we come together over. So let's reward that and emphasize that more.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and it makes me think. I had a great conversation this past week and with a guy who's going to be on the podcast soon. His name is Jim Place, and he's a longtime football coach and high school football coach, award winning. He's like a coach for 50 some years. In fact, he was friends with Herman Boone, the guy that was depicted in the movie Remember the Titans. And him and I were talking about that, and he does this huge football camp. We'll definitely get more on the podcast here in the coming weeks on that with Jim Place and his partner that have used sports as a huge unifier. and bringing people together from different backgrounds and things like that. So why don't you talk a little bit then about what Us United is doing on that front with sports and how we can use sports as a unifier. Music as well. I mean, music, you mentioned music, sports, food. Those are always, I mean, whenever we can sit down and break bread with people that aren't necessarily like us or think differently than we do, there's always a great opportunity there. And music brings people together from all different walks of life. But talk a little bit about, let's focus in a little bit more on the sports aspect of it and what you guys are doing at Us United.
A range of things. So, I mean, we have, for instance, to your point, we've run youth police community flag football tournaments and bringing kids with their parents and the law enforcement together as coaches, as players, and building bonds, building trust, building relationships. We do that frequently. We've done unity seats. Imagine you go to a football game and there's 4 seats, 6 seats reserved, and we invite 2 different families who never would interact for whatever reason. There's 1,000 reasons. Come watch your favorite team together. Figure out you didn't know each other before. By the end, you're going to be good friends, and that's what unity looks like. And by the way, in that case, division didn't get me football seats. Unity got me football seats to pick whatever team you want to see. But like now I'm sharing all that and I'm changing culture, right? Similarly, that 30 for us I've talked to you about before that we do on Zoom, we also do it in person. So we go around and we do rivalry editions of 30 for us, whether professional or college sports, get athletes, players, coaches, and fans together and say, hey, we just had Michigan play Ohio State, blood war, but we can come together afterwards and have a really good conversation. That's what unity looks like, and that's what sports can do. So we do all of those kinds of things, and then we share that content to say, look at what you're seeing, right? You thought that these people hated each other because of a game. No, they can really hate each other for 3 hours, but not afterwards and not before it. That's a lesson for all of us.
Oh yeah, no, it absolutely is. No, and that's a beautiful thing. So Adam, tell me about on this road trip that you've been on. How many states did you say you've been to already? 20.
Well, somewhere in the low 20s. I haven't done the math recently, but we got a long way to go.
Yeah,
we got a long way to go, but.
No, and I'm definitely looking forward to when you make it up my way and we can get together in person. But talk to me about some of the stories that you've seen in your travels and maybe kind of a breakout moment or a moment that somebody had in one of your interactions, right? Because that's always what it means for me. What I love about this business, well, it's not really a business, this movement, this bridge building depolarization movement, is when I see somebody for the first time and all of a sudden it's like kind of like a light switch and you can see that, oh no, it really clicked for somebody and they're then that now they're going to be part of the movement. Tell me about some of the stories or some of the things that you've seen in your travels that have really kind of stood out for you like that.
There's so many, but I'll give you a few. I mean, first, one of the best ideas that I've heard, and we posted this on our socials the other day because we're sharing as much as we can as we come across it. Wonderful woman in Birmingham, Alabama. She and her mom, two little restaurants together called Yo Mamas. And we talked about, hey, what are some of the tools you use or ideas you have to build unity? And she said, I got the 5-mile rule. If everybody within 5 miles of their home was nice, respectful, and contributed to their community, just within 5 miles, their immediate radius, she's like, basically, we're done. Because your 5 miles and my 5 miles will eventually overlap because everyone we go across, that's changing culture. And if we're respectful and kind within 5 miles, I don't have to get in my head, I can't be kind to someone in Minnesota. I can't be kind to someone in California because they're different than me, back to your labels. If I just start being kind within 5 miles, eventually every one of those 5 miles overlaps. And I've ended up being kind to someone in California without even knowing it. Right?
Yeah.
I thought that was beautiful. So that was one of my favorites. Then another time, I'll give you 2 stories of where I've become a little more, not aggressive, but engaged in terms of pushing people when they're kind of seeming to get divided. So we had a wonderful conversation with a couple out front of Doak Campbell Stadium of Florida State and posted part of this. And talking to this gentleman, he'd been in the military and very much about how we can build unity and family and respect. He said, but I kind of pushed him and say, well, what do you do when it gets hard? And he's like, if you burn the flag, I can't unify with you, basically, a little bit my words. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
but hey, you're in the military. You fought for the right to burn the flag. He's like, I know, but it's not right. You shouldn't do it. I said, okay, I hear you. But if someone got to the point that they were doing that, isn't it more helpful to ask them what spurred that? Why do they feel that way? And you can tell them, boy, it really bothers me, but let me understand why, because maybe in that question, you learn a little bit about something else you hadn't thought of that, again, it doesn't have to make burning the flag right to you, but it gives you context. And we
Mm-hmm.
talked back and forth and he said, what? You're right. I don't have to like it, but I need to ask the question. Right.
Yeah.
And that, and similarly had that conversation with a woman when we were in rural county in Pennsylvania, who was like quietly, is like, there's one person that's the problem of all this. I'm the only Trump. I'm the only Democrat, and people, my family, they won't talk to me. Those people won't listen to me. I said, what do you mean you're not? But you presume that you can't talk to them either. I mean, and this was not labeled because she knew the people. It's her community. She's like, I can't. They don't. I was like, how about asking more questions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Don't tell someone you're right or they're wrong. You're right, or ask questions. And I was like, and then if you don't agree, and these tools that I use, and you use them too, like explain an experience that you've had, or a friend or a family member that is different than their interpretation of that issue, whatever it may be. It's because if you tell someone, hey, I'm right, you're wrong, that doesn't work, right? If I tell you 10 times and louder, you're wrong, you're not going to listen to me.
That's right.
If you say, hey, this happened to me or my daughter or my husband, and it's different than what you think, they can't tell you your experience is wrong because it's your experience. It happened to you.
Yep.
And you're not necessarily going to change someone's mind, but if you move it 10% where they said, boy, I never thought of that. I didn't realize that could happen. They might not admit it to you, but that's unity, right? That's how we move
That's right.
forward.
That's
And
right.
so those are a few examples of when that happened. I can give you, if you have a second more, I mean, a story where literally, it's a 30 for us story when we first did it. We had 5 people this was in person, in a room, and the topic was, hey, if you were president for the day, what's one change you would make? So each person had to answer in a couple minutes their idea, and then there was an open discussion. Like the third person to speak, 26-year-old Black woman who was going back pre-med before going back to school for medical school. And she said, if I were president for the day, I would really ban and really get rid of redlining, which is an interesting answer. But what happened next was what was really interesting. The other 4 people, all of whom were white, said, what's redlining? They didn't know what it is. She then explained in a very personal and deep way how over 30, 40 years, redlining for her family near Detroit had destroyed their homes, taken things away from them, left them more impoverished than not. And at the end, and then they all had this open discussion at the end of it. The other 4 people, they all said at the end, we agree. If we were president today, we'd outline redlining based on what we agree. That doesn't happen if you hear a political speech or if you pick someone on TV talking about redlining, you go to your corner. She basically explained how it destroyed the wealth and the fabric of her family. And people said, that's wrong.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We won't let that happen if we were president either. That's the magic of what I hear and what I see.
No, that is fantastic, and it's stories like this, Adam, that really drive it home for people how important this is and how there are actual tangible results that come out of this work and how we can move the needle. I quite often I say that I'm not out here to change people's minds on anything. I'm just here to open them to other ideas. What you're talking about here is again going back to my friend Monica Guzman, having fearlessly curious conversations, and then people will tend to listen to you when they know that you're listening to them. It's through conversation. It's through listening to understand, not to respond. When people really understand that you are listening to them, hoping to understand, and then I want to drive home the point that you made that is so important here, and that's that when you actually tell people or show people that your lived experience is how you came to believe what you believe, or you listen to them telling you what their lived experience is. The example with the guy burning the flag and everything, I think a lot of people like myself who are veterans or like consider ourselves true patriots of this country do get infuriated when we see somebody burning the flag. But instead of letting our outrage over that particular act, which I think is disgusting, I too would get very bothered by that happening. But to step back out of our emotions for a second and say, what is it about this person's life? What is it about this person's lived experience? Me wanting to understand what it is about their lived experience that got them to the point that they would do such a heinous thing. That changes the dynamic of that interaction. It changes everything about that. And I think if we did that more, not allow our emotions to dictate our actions, another thing that I preach constantly, not allow our emotions to dictate our actions, but actually dive into that with a fearlessly curious conversation and say, what is it about your lived experience that made you do this thing that is just so ugly? And knowing that it's gonna have a very big effect on a lot of the people around you. Adam Mizel, this has been a fantastic conversation, man. I thank you for sharing more about Us United with us here at the Derate The Hate podcast. And I know there's going to be room for more conversations between us in the future. Thank you for stepping out of your road trip for a second and taking a little bit of time, man. I appreciate it.
Well, my pleasure. Love, like you, talking about this topic and hopefully giving people some ideas and some support. Because that's what I've seen. People have said, we need hope. We need inspiration. And when this crazy human me shows up driving across the country, they're like, wow, if you can do that, I can do something. And the same work you're doing. If you can do this podcast and tell more people and you get out there doing the work, people just need a little of that. And so keep up that hard work and that inspiration. The timing was perfect because a loud truck's about to turn on the street. So we got God smiling on us with giving us about 30 minutes of relative quiet. And so awesome to meet you and look forward to seeing you in person.
Excellent, man. I appreciate it, Adam. Take care of yourself. Safe travels.
Fabulous.
Friends, I want to thank you so much for tuning in. And if there's anything in this episode that provided exceptional value to you, please make sure to hit that share button. If you haven't done so already, please be sure to subscribe to get the Derate The Hate podcast sent to your email inbox every week. We really are better together. So please take a moment to visit braverangels.org and consider joining the movement towards civic renewal and bridging our political divides. This is Wilk wrapping up for the week saying get out there, be kind to one another, be grateful for everything you've got, and remember, it's up to you to make every day the day that you want it to be. With that, my friends, I'm going to back on out of here and we will catch you next week. Take care.